So hello and welcome to Design in Diaspora, a V&A Dundee series developed in partnership with We Are Here Scotland and New Architecture Writers to explore the work of contemporary designers and creatives from diasporic communities across Scotland. My name is Lela Sujani. I'm an architect and writer based in London, and I'm going to be your host for today. And today we are joined by the incredibly talented Kumi McKenna, an Aberdeen-based designer who takes elements from her mixed Japanese and Scottish background into her work. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to speak to you. And I guess one of the things that really draws me to your work is that there's this really vibrant, playful element to your work, but you also address, I guess, quite some serious issues and issues that a lot of people can relate to. So I guess we'll dive more into that in a bit. But before we get to that, could you just tell everyone in the audience a bit more about yourself, maybe your background, your childhood, and sort of your journey into design?
Yeah, so I'm Kumi McKenna. I'm half Japanese, half Scottish, and I grew up just outside of Glasgow in North Lanarkshire. And when I was little, I did a lot of drawing and stuff. And I think when I reached the end of high school, I realized this is really what I want to do. And I was definitely more on the graphic design side for a while. But after I did an internship in my third year of uni, I just realized I love illustration and just started exploring different routes. And here I am today with my current style and my current type of things that I'm doing.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I guess, how has your Japanese or Scottish background influenced your work, and in what way specifically? Could you tell me a bit more about that?
I think the way I see my work is I draw Japanese type things and maybe with a Japanese style, but there's a Scottish humor in it. So I think it's maybe like a balance between both. So, Japanese people can look at it and maybe have fun at the humor that's in there, and then Scottish people like it because it's maybe a different style of drawing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And was this sort of fusion of work always something that you were interested in, or is it something that sort of became later on, that sort of was introduced later on once after you sort of were studying?
I think it came kind of naturally in a way, especially because especially within university, I was doing lots of like 4-panel comics. So it was, I was still drawing in that style, but the comedy was still very Scottish. So I guess that's kind of how the fusion started, and I've just continued it because people said that my work makes them smile. So
oh, that's a really lovely compliment to hear. So how has your work, or I guess design process, evolved since you started? So I guess that takes us to our next question. How would you say it's evolved since you've started?
It's changed. I would say it's developed a lot more. Like I took a really long time to understand my design process, and it's evolved so much over the years. I still do it. I do it on my iPad and then add filters through Photoshop, but the way I'm doing this has changed dramatically over the years. And I've really gotten into printing, so reso printing. So I have some examples here. So
yeah, I would love to see them. Wow, those are incredible. That's amazing.
This is a 2022 New Year's card I made using this technique called reso printing. And I just love it because it has this like kind of warm retro feel to it, and it's always fun like cutting things up, and it's a bit of problem solving, but for somebody who's not very good at problem solving like me, it's like easy level problem solving. And I like having something physical to hold, because it's nice seeing it on your phone and stuff, but when it's something you can like put in your living room or in your kitchen and somebody can take home with them, that's just 10 times nicer.
Yeah, it has like a tactility to it, like the images.
Yes.
And I guess considering now in the digital age that we're in, and where sort of a lot of design processes have the option of being sort of digitalized, what are your thoughts on that? And sort of, I guess because you said you just recently became interested in printing, is it something that you sort of play around with, or are you sort of more comfortable with sort of hand drawing, or are you kind of heading more towards digital work? What's sort of your process?
I would say the printing is like still very much one-off for me. It'll be if I've made a design which I think people would like, or I would just simply like to have up on my wall, then I print. But there's both pros and cons to it, because I think digital work makes art accessible to everybody. If it's digital, then that means just anybody who can access Instagram can come and see work, and they don't have to, you know, come and buy my prints. But then on the other hand, the printing is so much fun, and I think for me, even when I buy stuff from other artists, like having something physical, you know, they've like touched and made, it has like a life of its own, kind of. So yeah.
And I guess also, I guess what I was saying before about sort of how your work is very relatable. It's almost like when someone has it, kind of carries a life of its own, and they're able to connect with it, and people are able to connect with your work in different ways, which I find really interesting. Is there a specific message or feeling that you wish to communicate through your work?
I feel like it's split in two. So I have like my fun work, which is like stuff like drawing a lunchbox, you know, like that's something fun and accessible for everybody. But then I do, as you've probably seen, I do cover more personal topics, especially about being Asian in Scotland, growing up in an area where I was like one of like 10 POC kids in the whole school. I have a lot of experiences there, and it's quite hard to verbalize those experiences. So when you actually draw them out and you can really communicate how you felt in that situation, or how you feel now about that situation. And I think that, you know, in a way it's not relaxing to draw that stuff, but the reward of getting so many people commenting, saying like, oh, I totally understand your experience, I've been through that too, that is really, I don't know if the word's rewarding, but like comforting, you know, that you're not alone in that experience.
Yeah, I think that's something I took away. I think because growing up, I think I had a similar experience to you, being one of a few Asian kids sort of, you know, in the Caribbean, but not being able to express those feelings, and you know, so to be able to see your work, I found really inspiring myself. And I guess, could you tell me a bit more about sort of that experience growing up in Scotland, and sort of how, I guess, how you managed to weave that into your work?
Yeah, well, I guess my most impactful situations of race happened when I was in high school. Honestly, when I was in primary school, I think until like maybe P1 or P2, I genuinely didn't know what race was. I didn't know that I was any different. But then, you know, people start saying things, or, you know, you start to realize you're treated differently. But yeah, when I was in high school, you know, certain like slurs were used all the time. You know, if you told somebody, hey, what you said was a bit insensitive, you'd just be called oversensitive, things like this. And I think doing these drawings are kind of a way to not cope, but reassure yourself that like this actually did happen to you in high school. So, you know, things like slurs, beauty standard issues, people not listening, you know, if you kind of draw it there, I think for many of my friends who aren't POCs, that it made it just so easy for them to read a 4-panel comic, and they could be like, I totally get, like, I see what happened to you, you know. It's great because it's, you know, you're scrolling on Instagram and you can just see it so easily in one little square.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite pieces was the one you did about beauty standards, and how you said that your mom was one of, you know, your first sort of, I guess, ideas of beauty, and I thought that was really touching and really beautiful. When
Yeah,
did you
definitely.
do that piece? Sort of what sort of propelled you to do that particular piece?
Well, sometimes I just go through these periods of really reflecting on like my past, and also being biracial. You know, it's it's a very difficult situation because certain things like my Japanese family won't understand, certain things my Scottish family won't understand, and I think I was just in one of those moments where I was, you know, thinking about that, and uh, yeah, I also just feel like from time to time you get those moments. Like currently, I see things like fox eye trends that are in, and that really made me think it's, you know, interesting how our features are kind of in fashion right now. Whereas in high school, you know, you were like, it was almost like, what's the point in me trying to be a part of this European beauty standard because I'm never going to reach it, you know? So I think I was having those thoughts when I made that comic.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I guess my next question to you is, who or what inspires you?
So I would say for sure my gran inspires me. She's I do so much food illustration, and a lot of it is inspired by food she made me in Japan. And also she always encouraged my drawing. Whenever I'd go visit there in summer, she'd always have like the watercolors out and she'd be painting next to me, or, you know, she'd be like, oh, what you're doing is really good. So she's definitely one of my big inspirations. And then the other person is definitely my mum, because you know, I think a lot of, especially more serious topics, my mum always looks at the artwork, and, you know, sometimes she'll say, oh, I didn't realize that this is the way you were thinking, or this is what happened. But she's always very encouraging and supportive whenever I'm talking about my own reflections.
Oh, that's really sweet. And I guess going on to continuing with your journey, have you ever reached a crossroad which propelled you in the direction of the art you currently create? So I guess.
Yeah, I think probably once I got to uni, and because during high school I wasn't made to feel ashamed of my Japanese background, but I was made to feel like it's something I couldn't really share as much, because there's so many stereotypes, like, oh, you do illustration, it has to be anime or manga drawings, things like this. But once I got to uni and I felt much more comfortable there, and I had more Asian friends there as well, I started to really embrace the fact that I was lucky to be able to go and experience Japan and take in the design and illustration side from there. So I really started implementing so much more Japanese influences within my work. So that, and then also just as you get more mature, you feel like you can maybe control your emotions a bit more, which then made it easier to start drawing about more serious topics. Especially because, you know, during the pandemic we had the rise of Stop Asian Hate, and I think that made me especially feel more empowered to be like, no, this is happening in Scotland, you know. Like, I think a lot of people didn't realize that, you know, these things are happening here too.
Yeah, so would you say at that point was when you sort of took that direction to kind of feed in more serious themes into your works, I guess? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess moving, is there anything which you aspire to achieve? So I know you're still very early in your career, and I guess what are sort of your next steps, or do you have any sort of projects in the works?
Yeah, so it's really hard to say what I aspire to do, because there's so many routes that I'm like looking at right now, and I love to do everything. But I guess one of them is for sure to kind of get more prints done, because it's something I love. And it's the idea of somebody really likes my work and they are hanging that up somewhere, that is a really good feeling. But I think my biggest goal for sure is probably to use my art to help people, which sounds really up myself, but
No,
I mean
not
like
at
the
all.
way that people can find some relatability to it. They, especially for the, for Asian people in Scotland, I'd love for them to kind of connect with what I've made and feel reassured. Ideally, I would really love to make a zine of comics and interviews and maybe some audio of Scottish Asian people, because I just think it'd be lovely to have something like that, because I think when I look back at me in high school, something like that would have been great to have, to be like, okay, the way you're feeling is normal. What they said was not okay. This is how you can calm down and try and feel better. So I think those are two very ambitious things that I'd like to propel myself to do within the next few months or years.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing the work you create. I guess another question was, what advice would you give to someone who is looking to pursue a career in illustration or design in the way you have? If you have 3 main words of advice, what would they be?
Ooh, the first one is don't stop. I think it's really easy when you're an illustrator, especially, to just look at someone's Instagram and be like, whoa, their illustrations are great. They must have just woke up one day and drew like that, which is not true at all. And I also sometimes make illustrations where I'm like, what is that? That's not good enough. So just keep drawing, and over time you will definitely be like, this works, this doesn't work. Second, I'd say, is use your personality. If you are quite serious, then you could do more serious artwork. If you're somebody who's funny, you can put some comedy into it. All these different things. I think it's important to get personality in there, because it allows your followers to just connect with you more immediately, I think. And then 3 would be explore every route. Like, don't stick with one media the entire time. There's going to be media that you'll hate. I can't stand chalk or anything that's dusty.
Okay.
But I love things that are, like pens, pencil. Try printmaking, try sculpture, try everything, because you'll make some things that you enjoy, and you might find a route that you want to go down. So.
Those are really great points. Actually, I'll take those points on as well.
Yes.
And I guess my other question is, if you could give your younger self advice, what would it be? I guess, as being a young Asian Scottish person growing up in Scotland, what advice would you give? Or even now that you are a designer, what advice would you give to younger self, knowing what you know now?
Eat less chocolate, first of all. Probably to, be sure of yourself. I think it's easy to second guess yourself when you're young. You don't see many other people around you that are going through the same thing as you, and it's really easy to just get into like a corner and just think that actually I am wrong about everything. But just be sure of yourself, even if you are wrong. That's something to think about and improve on. But I think as long as you don't always second guess yourself, that's the advice I'd give. But second guess yourself about the chocolate, for sure.